So let's jump in for the lesson of today. Today, I want to talk to you about wealth and opportunity because obviously we find ourselves in another historical moment. I don't know about you, but over the last 3 years, I've gotten a little tired of living through historically significant moments. And yet we find ourselves in one because, interest rates are still challenging. I hear that the market has awakened again, and yet at the same time, inventory is still a struggle. And now we've got this issue of banks, right? Where the bank in Silicon Valley went down and another one in New York went down. So it adds to the narrative of uncertainty and ultimately keeps people, I think, from having a ton of confidence in their next move. And it reminded me of a quote that I first heard back in 2008 when the market was falling out from underneath us. And I'm not saying that's what's happening now. And yet at that time, there was a lot of fear. And the quote actually came from Warren Buffett. And what he said was, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." And so the thing that I really wanted to first talk to you about today is, how are you using the shift in the market to build your wealth portfolio? And the reason I ask that is because as we shift from what I called a vitamin market is where most of the moves that are happening for life-enhancing reasons. So we're getting married, we're having a baby, we're buying the dream house, down to an aspirin move, which is pain ending. Pain ending are typically found in the 3Ds. It's death, debt, and divorce. So when you shift into an aspirin market where a lot of the moves are actually moving away from pain, there is opportunity available to you. And so what I know as it relates to building wealth are two things. One is that I find time and time again that most people are falling into the trap of hyperbolic discounting. And if you're somebody who is in your 20s or 30s, I really want you to hear what I'm about to say, because we have this age in our mind, and it's typically 62. That's when we can ultimately, quote unquote, retire, right? And yet the problem is that for some of you, especially those in your 20s and in your 30s, 62 is so far out that the trap of hyperbolic discounting is that the timeline is so far out, it does not influence your decisions today, that you aren't really focusing and being intentional about your wealth today. And so what I like to do with people, and many of you have seen this before, but I want to share it with you again, is walk them through what I call the 3 layers of, or the 3 levels of wealth. And what you'll see here is that enough numbers up at the top. I'm going to come back to that and explain to you what that means. But the first level that I want you to really focus on is your living expenses. And so when I say living expenses, I want you to think survival. So your mortgage, utilities, groceries, not very much, if any, entertainment, right? You're not living it up. But the question is how much money would you need coming in passively every single month for you to break even on all your living expenses? Now, if you talk about a number before tax, the most common answer that I have received over the years is $8,000 a month. That if I had $8,000 a month coming in passively every single month, that would break me even after tax on my living expenses if I'm not keeping up with the Joneses, I'm not riddled in debt, that type of thing. So with living expenses, you guys, I think that most of you, if you put your head down and really focused, inside of the next 3 years, you could create a wealth machine that pays you $6,000 to $8,000 every single month, regardless of what you're doing. And understand this is that as soon as your living expenses, the passive income you have exceeds your living expenses, you live in the world of get to. You are no longer in the world of have to. When you open your eyes in the morning, going to work every day is ultimately a choice. And so Whether you're an agent, operations, it doesn't matter. I don't think there's a person on this call that couldn't get there if you really focused in the next 3 years. The next one is lifestyle. Lifestyle is where you're living it up, right? When I ask most people what they define as lifestyle, they say, I get to do what I want with whomever I want, as much as I want, when I want, like that total freedom, that total sense of choice. Now, for those of you who've been in real estate for any length of time, if you ask a newer agent to the industry how much money they want to make, they usually say the same thing, which is $100,000 a year. When I ask the question, how much money would you need coming in passively every single month or every year for you to live the ideal lifestyle, the most common answer I hear is $250,000, $250,000 a year for most people. If it were coming in passively, they can pretty much do whatever it is that they want. And so that number, if you really focused after the living, I think you could get there after you've established that foundation in another 3 to 5 years. So we're talking within 1 to 8 years here for you to be 1,000% financially free. And it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much you keep. And what's interesting is I'll never forget when the pandemic first hit and we were on a mastermind with Gary, and a guy asked Gary, hey, should I be considering buying real estate right now? And Gary said, well, that just tells me that you're not a true investor. Because a true investor has specific criteria that anytime they are met, pulls the trigger and ultimately buys whatever that investment is. And Gary flipped the conversation back on him, and he said, I'm curious, are you investing in real estate now? And the guy said, no. And Gary said, why not? And he said, because I don't have the money. And he said, okay, cool. If I gave you $1 million, what would you do with it? And the guy didn't have a specific answer, right? And obviously he's put on the spot, but he didn't have a specific answer. And then Gary said something that has stuck with me forever since then. He said, your problem isn't that you don't have the money, it's that you don't know what you would do if you did have it. And what I want you to understand is that in the world of residential real estate investing, the greatest skill that you could ever develop is the bird dogging of deals. If you find deals, meaning you find people that are willing to sell a home at a discount, the money will find you. I promise you, if you're listening to this right now, and you were to hit me up offline and say, I've got this property and here's the ARV and all those numbers, I could shop that through myself or the people on this call, and I would find you the money. So not having the money is not an excuse for not building wealth. So the living expense, guys, like I mentioned, $8,000 a month. Lifestyle, that's roughly for most about $20,000 a month or $250,000 a year. Anybody could get there in the next 0 to 8 years if you really put your head down and focused. And pay attention to the newsletter that comes out today, because we talk about this idea of what is the skill set that I could download into the mindset of the people around me. And I think it really just ties nicely into that idea of finding deals. That's a skill set that you could download into your mindset to set yourself free. Now, ultimately, where we go next is to your legacy. And legacy, when we're talking about it from a financial perspective, to me, it boils down to who do you want to set up when you're gone? What causes do you want to impact? And ultimately, I think for most people that those two areas are kind of the things that they focus on the most. And I'll never forget when I first started coaching someone who came down with a really nasty case of breast cancer, and her father had set up a trust that he told her, don't touch it unless you needed it. She never did. Then when she got sick, she used the money from that trust to keep herself financially going, and she was able to really focus on healing. And I really believe that trust saved her life. And I grew up in a household that really was all about how rich kids had it great and trust fund babies and all that. I'd never heard the positive sides of wealth. And that's a real positive side, that you can literally save the lives of the people in your world if you are focused and can set them up in a way that if they ever needed the money, it's there. But That's the quantitative side to wealth, you guys. That everything I just shared with you is quantitative. And I want you to get really clear about what I just shared with you. There are 3 levels: living, lifestyle, legacy. And then inside of each level, there are 3 things that you have to do. And you're going to love this because everything's going to start with the same letter. Haha, I made it so easy for you. So it's the 3 L's: living, lifestyle, legacy. And then inside of each one, you got to do the 3 T's. So you have to define your targets. So the targets are the monthly income numbers: 8,000, 20,000. The next one is you've got to know your timelines. So $8,000, I'm going to create that in the next 3 years. So by the time we're having this conversation in 2026, March 1st of 2026, I will have $8,000 a month in passive income. And then lastly are your tactics. So what are the tactics that you're going to put into play for you to ultimately do that? Right? For you to follow through and actually create that. I hope most of the people on this call will be looking at real estate as your primary tactic, and a couple more that some of you have access to are the profit share. I know that profit share has gotten a bad name or a bad rap over the years, but I make like upwards of almost 30 grand a year in profit share. Market center ownership is another good vehicle. If you don't own any parts of a market center and you feel like you add a lot of value there, that's another good one. But residential real estate is available to each and every one of you. Are you taking advantage of it? Now, on the qualitative side of it, the qualitative side of wealth, money is not the most important thing. Because I asked this question recently. I did a presentation for a small group of people in Durango last week, and I started asking them about wealth and what their definitions were. And of course, everybody started throwing out financial type definitions. But I wanted to give them a different perspective on 3 things that actually have a lot more value than money. And so the perspective I gave them is, 1, if I came to you and I said, hey, tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up and there is going to be a deposit for $1 million cash into your bank account, and it's 100% yours. When you woke up tomorrow morning and saw that money completely unencumbered inside of your bank account, I would imagine that you're going to have a pretty good day. And I would imagine that it would take a lot for anyone to piss you off or to knock you off kilter for at least the next 24 to 48 hours if you were given $1 million, right? And I said, okay, but let me ask you this. What if I made it 10 million instead of 1 million? But the deal is that you don't get to wake up tomorrow. You only have the time from right now, which is 10:15 Central, until tonight. But the $10 million will be there for you tomorrow. Would you take it? And the answer is no. So what I want you to understand is that your time is actually more important to you than $10 million. And that waking up tomorrow morning is actually worth more to you than $10 million. But are you treating it that way? Now, here's the other thing. Imagine that I said, hey, I'll give you $10 million. And yet for the rest of your life, you're going to be sick. You're not going to feel well. You're going to be low energy. You're going to have to constantly go to the doctor. Would you do it? Would you take it? And the answer for all of us would be no. Okay, so what you're telling me is that real health is true wealth. Is that what you're telling me? That your health to you is worth more than $10 million, and yet are you treating it that way? The thing about health, you guys, is it's like you get one car, only one. If you when you were 25, 30 years old, if someone came to you and said, this is the only car you ever get for the rest of your life, how often would you get the oil changed, the brakes updated and changed? How often would you clean it and keep it just in an impeccable shape? And see, your body's the same way. You get one car, and your health is worth more to you than $10 million. The second or the third thing is, if I said to you, here's $10 million, but you never get to talk or see the people that you love most in the world again, you never get to talk to them or see them, would you take it? The answer is no. So your relationships are worth more to you than $10 million. Are you treating them that way? So those three things are worth more to you than any amount of money. And yet, are you counting and feeling that as a blessing? I'm going to leave you today with one of my all-time favorite quotes. And this comes from Naval Ravikant. It was in the book that I sent many of you, not last year, the year before, the Almanac of Naval. And he says, a fit body, a calm mind, a house full of love. These are things that cannot be bought. They must be earned. That, to me, is real wealth, you guys. So I trust that you will take from this the quantitative side of wealth, understanding the three levels and defining your targets, your timelines, and your tactics. And then I want you to get the qualitative side. And what I would encourage all of you on the qualitative side to truly understand is that your time, your health, and your relationships are worth more. Now, if you really want to feel the wealth of your relationships, there's an exercise that I would encourage you to do. You've heard me say this before, and it is your letters of legacy. Now, Scott Maloof, who's one of my clients, many of you know him, taught me a quote that I've loved ever since he said it, and it is that your legacy is what you leave for people, or what you leave in people, not what you leave for them. It's what you leave in them, not for them. And Laura will pop this into the chat box if she hasn't already, but the growth tool for the letters of legacy are there. And it's a letter that you would write to anyone on the face of the earth that matters to you. And if you'll notice, we have very specific ways that we encourage people to fill this out. And then you do what you want to do with your letters. But here's the impact it had for me is I will never forget the first one I wrote was to my daughter, Leah. And there were some things that I had put in there that made me realize I needed to increase my standards as a father. I was leading her a lot through fear, focusing on how I didn't want her to turn out or how I didn't want her to act. And when I saw that, it was such a great perspective. I instantly shifted and quit all of that. I quit talking to her and don't wants. And the effect that had was similar to the Charles Dickens book, A Christmas Story or A Christmas Carol. And if you know the story, Ebenezer Scrooge is visited by three ghosts, the past, the present, and the future. And he's given this whole new perspective, but he doesn't know that it's a dream. And so when he wakes up, he realizes that no time has passed. He got all the lessons with none of the punishment. And he changed everything. That's the thing that the letters of legacy can do for you. And if you write them and then read them, I promise you that will be one of the most abundant, wealthy feelings that you as a human being can muster. So I'm glad to be back. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you who have calls this week. We will be here next week. And I trust that you'll take away the lessons from today and put them into action. I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.